All right, let's just jump right in. It turns out there's a hole, a kind of flaw at the very foundation of math. And what that means is there are statements out there that are totally true, but we can never prove them. Ever. And yeah, that discovery, it basically turned our whole understanding of logic, certainty, and even reality itself completely upside down.
So what does that actually mean in practice? Well, take something like the twin prime conjecture. The idea that there are an infinite number of prime number pairs that are just two apart, like 11 and 13. That might be totally true, but we might just never be able to prove it. That's the huge mystery we're going to try and unpack here. What are the absolute hard limits of human knowledge?
And a perfect way to start thinking about this is with something that looks super simple on the surface, Conway's game of life. Now, it's not a game you play in the normal sense. It's more like a simulation. You set up a starting pattern of cells, hit go, and then just watch. It's its own little universe in a box, and it's perfect for exploring this massive question.
And here's the thing. This entire universe runs on just two incredibly basic rules. That's it. One for when a new cell is born, one for when an existing cell dies. But from that almost ridiculous simplicity, you get this explosion of complexity. You see things like stable blocks, you see these pulsing oscillators, and you even get these amazing little gliders that look like they're alive, just cruising across the grid forever.
And this is the really wild part. If you start with some big, complicated pattern, there is literally no way to know for sure what's going to happen to it in the end. No algorithm, no supercomputer can tell you. Will it fizzle out and die, or will it just keep growing and growing forever? You could let it run for 1 billion years, and you still wouldn't have a definitive answer. The problem is what we call undecidable, and to really get why that is, we've got to take a trip back in time. Okay, so let's head back to the early 1900s. Math was, well, it was kind of having a nervous breakdown. All these new, weird ideas about infinity and strange geometries were popping up, and they were shaking the whole field to its core. So this one guy, a total genius named David Hilbert, he decides he's going to fix it. He sets off on this epic quest to put all of mathematics on a perfect, solid, totally unshakable foundation.
So to build this foundation, Hilbert laid out 3 absolutely crucial questions. The first one was, is mathematics complete? Basically, can every true statement be proven? If something in math is true, is there always a proof for it out there somewhere just waiting for us to find it? And I mean, that seems like it should be true, right? It feels intuitive.
Second, he asked, is mathematics consistent? And this is a big one. It's totally non-negotiable. A consistent system means no contradictions. You can't prove that 1 + 1 = 2 and also prove that 1 + 1 does not equal 2. If you could do that, the whole thing just falls apart. It's all just nonsense at that point.
And his third and final question was, is mathematics decidable? In other words, is there some kind of universal method, an algorithm, that you could feed any mathematical statement into and it would just crunch away and spit out a definite true or false? And hey, that sounds a lot like our problem with the game of life, doesn't it? Now, Hilbert was a massive optimist. He was 100% sure the answer to all 3 of his questions was a resounding yes. This quote of his, "We must know, we will know." It's actually on his tombstone now. And it just perfectly sums up his faith that, human reason could figure it all out. But a tiny little crack was already beginning to show in his grand vision. And that crack came from a really tricky, deceptively simple idea: self-reference. What happens when a system starts talking about itself? It was a logician named Bertrand Russell who found a paradox buried in this idea. A paradox so deep it threatened to bring Hilbert's whole project crashing down before it even got started.
Okay, let's try to break this down. Some collections, or what mathematicians call sets, actually contain themselves. Think about the set of all sets. Well, it's a set, so it has to contain itself. But most sets don't, right? The set of all shoes isn't a shoe. The set of all planets isn't a planet. Pretty straightforward.
But then Russell comes along with this absolute brain melter of a question. What about the set of all sets that don't contain themselves? Just think about that for a second. Does it contain itself? Well, if it does, then it shouldn't, because it's only supposed to contain sets that don't contain themselves. Okay, so what if it doesn't contain itself? Well, then it fits the rule, so it should be in there. It's a complete trap. It contains itself if and only if it doesn't. That's a paradox, a flat-out contradiction, all born from that sneaky idea of self-reference.
Now, mathematicians eventually found some clever ways to sort of patch up the system to avoid Russell's specific paradox, but the ghost of self-reference was still hanging around. And then, in 1931, this quiet,
unassuming 24-year-old logician, Kurt Gödel. He takes that very same ghost and uses it to just completely shatter Hilbert's first big dream. What Gödel did was nothing short of genius. He basically figured out how to turn logic into numbers. He invented this incredible code where every single symbol in math, plus, minus, equals, all of it, gets its own unique number. And with that system, he could take any mathematical statement, any proof at all, and turn it into one single gigantic number. And here's the brilliant part. By doing that, he made it possible for math to make statements about itself. He gave math a way to talk about its own rules.
So using this brand new, powerful tool, Gödel carefully constructed a mathematical statement. A statement that, when you ran it through his code and translated it back into English, basically said, this statement is unprovable. Think about that. It was a perfectly legitimate mathematical sentence that was pointing right back at itself and declaring its own unprovability. And that right there creates this inescapable logical trap. Let's walk through it. What if the statement is false? Well, if it's false, then its claim to be unprovable is wrong, which means it can be proven. But wait, now you've just proven a false statement. That's a contradiction. That would mean math is inconsistent and the whole system is broken. So, the only other option is that the statement has to be true. But if it's true, then you have a statement that is true and unprovable. You've just found a true statement that has no proof. And just like that, boom, mathematics is incomplete. Hilbert's first big question got a hard no.
So, the dream of a complete system of math? It was dead. But Hilbert had other questions, right? What about decidability? Was there still some master algorithm out there that could sort all true statements from false ones? Well, just 5 years later, another young genius, a British mathematician named Alan Turing, he'd step up to answer that one. And in doing so, he would accidentally invent the computer. To even think about this problem, Turing came up with a concept. He imagined this theoretical machine, a Turing machine. It's super simple, really. Just a little head that can read and write zeros and ones on an infinitely long strip of tape, all based on a simple set of rules. But don't let the simplicity fool you. This abstract idea is so powerful that it can, in theory, compute anything that is computable. It's literally the conceptual blueprint for the laptop, the phone, every computer we use today.
And using this idea of a machine, Turing framed Hilbert's question in a new way. He called it the halting problem. And it's a great question. Basically, could you create one master program, like the ultimate debugging tool, that could look at any other program and tell you for sure what it's going to do? Will it eventually finish its job and halt? Or will it get stuck in an infinite loop and just run forever?
And Turing proved with absolute certainty that the answer is no. It's impossible. And he did it using the same kind of sneaky, self-referential trick that Gödel used. He imagined a program that basically asks the halt checker, hey, what do you think I'm going to do? And whatever the checker says, the program is designed to do the exact opposite. If the checker says it will halt, it runs forever. If it says it runs forever, it halts. It's another paradox. It proves that a universal checker like that can't possibly exist. And with that, Hilbert's final dream died. Mathematics is undecidable.
I mean, when you step back and look at the timeline, it's just an incredible story. It all starts with Hilbert's philosophical quest for perfect certainty in math. That leads directly to Gödel proving that perfect certainty is impossible. And that, in turn, inspires Turing to invent his abstract machine, which becomes the theoretical foundation for every single computer on Earth. It's an amazing chain of events.
And that's where we get to the final and, frankly, beautiful irony of this whole story. Hilbert's grand project? It failed. Completely. He didn't get the answers he wanted, but out of that failure, we got this unbelievable gift. Turing didn't just keep his ideas on paper. He used them to build actual machines that broke the Nazi Enigma code, which helped win World War II. And those code-breaking machines were the direct ancestors of ENIAC, the first real programmable computer. And that led straight to the phone or the laptop you're holding in your hands right now.
So where does that leave us? This whole quest to find the absolute limits of what we can know, this search for the unprovable and the undecidable, it didn't end in some depressing crisis. Far from it. Instead, it accidentally gave birth to the single most powerful tool for creativity and discovery that our species has ever invented. It just goes to show you, sometimes the most important discoveries aren't the answers you were looking for, but the amazing things you create along the way.